Hello everyone, Big Seven here, back for another SuperCoach video, and I'm starting a new series. It's called The Seven, and it starts today. So it's as simple as it sounds. I'm going to go through the 7 players I like the most in terms of premium defenders, premium midfielders, premium forwards, rucks. I'll lump them all together, and then I'll probably do a mid-prices video as well. And I'm going to start off with the Rucks. I'll do that this week. The other positions I'll probably get into next week once we have a bit more data from the second set of practice matches. But Rucks, they're the position that I've probably spent the most time on this preseason, as I'm sure would be the case for a lot of other people. And I think they are the most make or break position, and people will probably be debating who to go with right down to the wire. In terms of myself, I've got a short list of 7 ruckmen, but really I don't see myself going anywhere apart from the top 3 that I have. So without any further ado, I'll just head straight into the list. Down at 7, I've got Sam Draper, and I guess he's probably the only ruckman I see in a sub 450k that could potentially break out into a solid 9,500 averaging ruckman. And Sam Draper, he fits the age profile of around about the times that um, a player from the ruck position will break out to the next level. For me personally, I don't see it with Draper. I think it could be a year too early, or he might just never make that leap. Looking at his scoring from previous seasons, he has a number of games where he'll play out the whole game for a sub 50. And the other question is, do Essendon play a 2-ruck setup with Andrew Phillips? Also played a bit of Nick Bryan last year. So on paper, I could see the Draper work picking, but it's not a pick for me. I don't have a I don't have a strong conviction on this pick. I'm not keen on it at all. The player I've got at 6, and this is kind of a contingency pick. It really depends on if he's named in round 1, because it's not a guarantee that he is, and that's Brent Teakle. Scored 51 average in 2 games, and even if he does get the gig round 1, I'm not convinced that he will be able to hold out Scott Lysett. If he has a couple of poor games, I could see him dropped early in the year. Likewise with Lysett. Lysett could start off the year and Brent Teakle could play some games. Either way, at 198k for a guy with not much job security, I wouldn't feel comfortable fielding him. He is a cheap ruck 2 option, but not for me. The guy I've got at 5th is a player that I think could be in consideration for fielding, and that is Asava Radicalier. So he is 174k. He's not actually going to be playing as a ruckman this year. He will be playing back in defence. A little bit unsure if he actually plays round 1, although Jack Henry getting injured this week in the preseason game does help his cause a little bit. And look, I think he will be a solid enough player if he does get the gig and manages to hold his spot. Kind of think of him as someone in the Paddy McCartan role from last year. Will take a bunch of intercept marks, but outside of that, probably doesn't have a lot of scoring. So, if he averages somewhere between 60 and 65, is that enough to put at your ruck 2 spot? I'm a bit unsure about that. And the other problem with playing Asava at ruck 2 is that if he was to get injured or dropped, it would more likely be injured. Then you would have to restructure your team to basically get a premium ruckman back in. So I don't mind Asava Radicalier as an option at all. At R2, I'm a bit less sure about. I think he can potentially go at R3 if you've got the money to do that. Or you could put him at a F6 position, F7, and have a cheap loophole ruckman on your bench. The player I've got at 4, And this is a player I've kind of warmed to, but still I'm not really that keen on. It's Jared Witz, and you're paying 605K. What you're getting for that is stability. Generally doesn't get injured. He did have an ACL injury, but aside from that, he has managed to stay fairly injury free throughout his career. So, what is the problem with that? Nothing. I think it's a pretty stable option, but I think looking at his matchups from last year, his average is inflated. Before last year, didn't have an average over 100 in a single season. And so I get that Gold Coast midfield has got a bit better, but also he had an extremely good run of ruckman last year. He had games against Darcy Ford as the main ruckman. He had games against Jacob Kaczynski, who isn't even a ruckman. He had a game against Jordan Sweet when Tim English missed. So for me, I see Jared Witz as a overpriced, inflated option. He brings stability, which can be a good thing. I think, yeah, he's just a bit overpriced for mine, but I can see the merit in picking him. Into the top three. And the player I've got at 3 is Tim English. And he's the player, in my opinion, that represents the most upside. He's not actually that good of a ruck. I mean, he is okay, but if you're comparing Witz and English on a hit-outs basis, then Witz is going to dominate. But it's the around-the-ground work that made Tim English so valuable last year. He isn't just someone that a team will kick down the line to. He will actually get involved in the build-up play, short chip kicks to him. He'll run other ruckmen off their feet. And he managed to average 105, scoring big games against some of the best ruckmen as well. I think he scored, what was it, in round 1 against Melbourne last year? It was... 123 against Max Gawn, who is the game's premier ruckman. So what's the issue with English? It's his durability. And he's had a couple of concussions, so you would think any kind of head knock, the Bulldogs would be conservative with him. I think he's also had a adductor injury during the preseason, a hamstring injury during preseason. I think he might have had a hamstring injury this last season or season before as well. So with Tim English, you've got all the upside. You've got the job security, obviously. It's just, do you want to take the risk with his injury history? And I think, yeah, the case is definitely there for Tim English to be picked. Into my top 2. And the player I've got at 2 is Rowan Marshall. And look, he's been a guy that's been handcuffed for a number of years. And in terms of that, I mean that he's someone that we know has had a big scoring profile. But St Kilda have also had another good ruckman playing, which was Paddy Ryder. And his retirement should open up the main ruck role for Marshall, sorry. In the past, Marshall was someone that played a lot of forward time, which kind of limits his scoring. But when he does play in the ruck, he is a decent ruckman. He gets around the ground, takes marks. And so now that Ryder's gone, Marshall is definitely underpriced. Can he match it with the big boys? I think he could potentially average somewhere between 105 and 110, which would put him up there with the big dogs this year. So Rowan Marshall, he's underpriced, has the role. I think he's a pretty safe selection, 44% of sides. That really tells you that I think he'll be the ruck one for a lot of teams. And the player I've got at 1, and I think this guy's being slept on a fair bit, that's Sean Darcy. And he averaged 102 last year, but looking back through his scoring, I'm going to argue that it's underscored. He missed the start of the year, so didn't have a continuous preseason. So didn't play round 1. Round 2, Lloyd Meek was in the side, and again round 4, Lloyd Meek was in the side and taking all of the or not all of them, but the majority of ruck contests. And Sean Darcy, he is a capable forward, but he's definitely better in the ruck in terms of Supercoach scoring. And after that, he did average okay. Obviously, a 178 against North Melbourne boosts the average. But aside from 59 against the Dogs, he was pretty solid in the second half of the year. And he has done it before as well. 2021 averaged 118. And it's not like that's ancient history. That was a couple of years ago. He's still relatively young. I guess the main concern that people have is that Luke Jackson comes across from Melbourne, and people might be concerned, Luke Jackson's on the up. What's the ruck split going to be between Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson? But look at the guy who was the top for ruckman last year. It's Max Gawn, and I get that he was a generational ruckman, probably the best ruckman of this decade, but still, it shows that just because Luke Jackson's in your side doesn't mean that you can't score points. And so Sean Darcy at an 102 average, and based off the preseason game, Sean Darcy got the majority of centre bounce attendances anyway in ruck contests. So I think that the whole Luke Jackson coming across the Fremantle is a bit overblown. Yes, Luke Jackson is going to be a good, probably great player in the future. But in terms of taking ruck time, I just don't see it. And even if he does blossom into an amazing player, he's the kind of player that could be getting centre bounces as a ruck rover, or he could be pushing up the ground as a high forward, or even a combination of that. So I think Sean Darcy is still the main guy at Fremantle. We've seen in the past, he has the scoring profile to average huge. And for me, my number one ruck option going into the year. Let me know who you guys are going for in the rucks. I don't think I will change this. English definitely is a consideration for me, but just the injury concerns worry me a bit. If he makes it through to the bye fit, then I'll probably have regrets not picking him. But I'm going to back against him at this stage, though definitely could be swayed. I guess the other high ownership guys I haven't mentioned. Darcy Cameron's just a no. It looks like they're going to split time between Mason Cox and Darcy Cameron in the ruck position. Cameron was good last year, but can he go to another level? I'm not sure how much improvement he has left in him, and just not a pick for me. And then Brody Grundy. I guess Brody Grundy and Max Gawn, both really good ruckmen in their own right, but they're going to be splitting ruck time with each other. So, and I don't think for Gawn, it's like a Gawn-Jackson where Gawn is the main ruck. I think this is close to a 50-50 split. And because of that, they're going to handcuff each other's scoring. So, that's all the ruckmen worth considering, in my opinion. Let me know who you guys have gone through down in the comments below, and I'll be back probably next week with another episode of The 7. Thanks for watching.